why do I have a picture of this gentleman on the board? Why do you think? What am I talking about? What did I say I was going to talk about on Thursday? Today. You don't remember? All right, that's fine, sir. That's giving you knowledge. Knowledge. Well, what month is it? September. It is September, sir. Yes, that deserves a fist pump. Yes, fist pump, I mean. Yes, but what else is it? What else is it? Why am I going to talk? What does September have to do with this news? Vipero Sarah. Vipero Sarah. What does September have to do with him? Huh?
Like the saint or the monk or something.
He's a saint or a monk or something.
No, not a monk.
Oh.
Not a monk, like saint of the monk.
Oh, saint of the month.
He was
Okay.
the best saint.
He's the best saint in September. Okay, well, we're progressing a little bit. All right. Sure, it took some time when our ancestors discovered fire. It didn't just all come at once. And then we were off to the races. Trigonometry, calculus. Yes, Miss Diaversa? No, Miss Howerton. Did he create the month of September? Like the calendar, you mean? Okay. It's an interesting guess. No. No, he did not. It's a good guess, though. Interesting. No, he did not. Juniper Serra did not create our calendar. There he is. Yes, what is the month? What is the month? It's Durant. Nothing?
Isn't he a saint?
Huh? He is a saint, Saint Juniper Serra. But why am I talking about him during September?
Is it the month he became a saint or something?
Nope. That's an excellent guess. Very good guess, but no. Because I'm going to talk about other saints during this month, not just necessarily him.
Did he die?
But what's he? Huh?
Did he die?
I don't think so, no. You can look at my notes. Did I put it in my notes? No, he died in August. Miss Krause? That's pretty close. No cigar, sir. Miss Krause? What's so special about this month? Don't know? What did I say on Tuesday? You were here. You forget.
What did you say on Tuesday?
I know, sir. It's like... Who said that? Oh, you're not going to fess up to it, eh, Miss Cook? Okay. I thought it was you.
Me.
Oh, it was you? Oh, sorry, Miss Cook. Okay, I heard it. Sorry, Miss Cook. I apologize. Miss Howerton. Yes, I do remember Miss Howerton. Oh, man. Hispanic Heritage Month, Mr. Melendez. So I'm looking at American Catholics who have reached sainthood. They've reached the Hall of Fame, in a manner of speaking, or are on their way to sainthood. Juniper Serra, and he was Hispanic. He was from Spain itself. He was born the island. His name was Juniper Serra y Ferrer, and Sarah y Ferrer, and he lived from 1713, I think it's 84. Let me check my notes again. 17, yeah, 84. He was born on the island of Majorca. Anyone ever take a trip to Majorca? Well, I've ever been to the island of Majorca. It's still part of the Kingdom of Spain. It's a kingdom still. I forget Felipe II, I think, is the king now. I visited there once on a vacation. Very pretty island. He was born there. And then he traveled when he was around 56, actually. So as an older gentleman, he traveled to Mexico to be a missionary. And then they sent him up to the area of California, which is now the state of California. Hence, I make that connection good enough for me for him to be an American, at least in my view. So there he is. And he's a saint. You have to remember that, at that time in the 1700s, the British had colonized the eastern seaboard for the most part, some parts of Canada, eastern Canada. But the Spanish, for everything from like Texas across to California, was all Spanish territory. The Kingdom of Spain, part of the Spanish Empire, Spanish had invaded and colonized and settled it. And so eventually the French would also show up in the middle of our country, but that's another story. Anywho, so he's part of the Spanish Empire, and so that he was sent as a missionary to minister to the Native Americans who had become Christian. And so he traveled all up and down the coast of California, founding missions, little settlements where Christians could live, especially the Native Americans could come and live. For a number of reasons. Well, first reason was that, in any tribalistic society, difference is not really tolerated very much because it's dangerous. You can't have everyone going off doing his or her own thing in a tribe. You need unanimity pretty much. So if you're different, like you reject the whole religion of the tribe, like, I'm a Christian now. I don't believe in the Great Spirit. I'm not going to worship the ancestors anymore. I'm worshiping this guy, Jesus. That can cause division, and it did. And even threats of violence against the Christian natives. So they would go to the missions and live there where they knew they wouldn't be killed for being Christian by their people. So that's one reason that people like Sarah did that. Hello, Ms. Rogers. Another reason was to keep them away from the Spaniards themselves. Sarah and his fellow religious people wanted to keep these new Christians away from the old Christians who had come from Spain, who were Christians, but apparently not living very Christian lives. And they didn't want them to enslave the natives or do bad things to them. So that was another reason to keep them away from their own people whom they didn't trust. So the mission system. So you could still, anyone go to California, if you ever visited California, you can visit some of these missions. They're still standing. They're in museums now and stuff like that. It's a controversial system nowadays, especially if you're Native American, because it's seen as a form of cultural genocide, civilizing the Native Americans. The Europeans attempt to civilize the Native Americans and also destroy their culture and their language, which there might be some truth to that. I don't think that was first and foremost. Didn't know St. Juniper, but I'm not sure if that was first and foremost in his mind. It just kind of happened. I think he was trying to protect them in a lot of ways. But on the other hand, I'm not saying that the friars or that he had, thought the Native Americans were their equals. They may have maltreated or mistreated some of them in their missions. It's possible. So it's controversial. Nevertheless, he did all of this work. I mean, he was not a healthy man. He had asthma. And of course, at this time, there were no inhalers. So I guess if you had an asthmatic attack, you were on your own. Well, you were on your own. So he had asthma. He also developed an ulcer in one of his legs. So imagine walking hundreds and hundreds, multiple hundreds, maybe even thousands of miles, because California is a long state, up and down on tracks. There's no roads at the time, of course, the tracks you follow. Walking, maybe riding a donkey or something, but with this pus-filled, ulcerous leg and, asthma, not breathing necessarily so good. But he did it. He was hardcore. This is what he wanted to do, to serve the people, visit different communities, take care of them. He as you can see, well, maybe no one said this, but anyways, he was a religious, he was a priest, he was a member of the Franciscan order, so he's wearing the habit of the Franciscans, their uniform, which is usually brown, sometimes it's gray or black, but his group, I guess, was brown, could have been gray, anyways, but he's shown in brown. And he was not a monk or anything, he was a friar, which is a different type of religious group. Monks usually are bound to a monastery. They never leave it. They spend their whole lives there in prayer and meditation and all sorts of stuff. Whereas friars are kind of like liberated monks. They get, they're more mobile. They're not bound necessarily to one building or place. They are a religious group as well, but they can move around more. So that's how that developed. And the group he joined was founded by a man named Francis of Assisi, who was an Italian, so it's called the Franciscans. That's not their official title. Their official title is the Order of Friars Minor, the Lesser Brothers, to show their humility. Hence, they put it right in the name, so you can see it. They're letting you know we're the lesser brother. Lesser than you, Mr. Glitch. We're humble. Anyways, so the Franciscans. Okay. So he was beatified in 1988, and then he was declared a saint just 10 years ago in 2015. 2015. Why did, probably, I guess because of the controversy of the mission system. Maybe that's why it took so long. But anyways, so what's the process here? He was declared a saint, but what's the process? Being declared a saint is just being like in the religious hall of fame, okay? It's not, there might be people who are very good and holy people who should be classified as saints, but we don't know about them. That's very many people, maybe. So it's just an official recognition. There's nothing special in that sense. Like if you're not declared a saint, you weren't a saint. You didn't officially make it. Nevertheless, there is a process, because you don't want to somehow maybe canonize evil people by accident, canonize, Saint Bob, and find out that, Bob had like 10 bodies buried in his backyard. Yeah. That's what should happen in theory, but if you read the lives of some of the saints, I don't know, you kind of wonder. So, anyway, no, I'm going to assume they're all good men and women. Anyways, you start out as a servant of God. If a person has a reputation, you need a reputation. So you start out, there's an investigation. People hear that this person who died, and you have to be dead as well. Sometimes, there are living saints. There are people that, are acclaimed as saints even while they're alive because they have their reputation is there. But you need a good reputation. And so based on that reputation, and maybe some weird things are happening at your gravesite, the blind are starting to see, and, cancerous tumors disappear, So some weird stuff's happening. Okay, let's start an investigation to see if this person is qualified to be called a saint officially and venerated. So we call them a servant of God. And some people just stay at this level of servant of God. They never move. I don't know why. Probably because they don't have anyone to promote their cause, because that takes time and money. But anywho, servant of God. So the person's called a servant of God. And they do an investigation. They look for any skeletons in the person's closet, read over any of their writings or talk to people who knew them personally. And, did Bob really have bodies in his backyard? Yeah, he didn't kill all those people. That was his brother. He knew nothing about it. Bob knew nothing. He was in his room praying before the Blessed Mother. Anyways, so you do an investigation. You see if the person warrants even to go forward. And if they do, then they become a venerable. It's the second process. They're honorable now. Yes, you can publicly honor them. They seem to be legitimate, holy people, not phonies or fakes. Does that mean that if someone stays at the servant of God level that, I don't know, they found something, Miss Howerton, like something bad, Well, maybe, they sometimes, like, I don't know, might be a very holy person, but they had one little flaw that maybe it's not the time yet. Maybe I don't know. But venerable, and then when they're venerable, there's still further investigation. But well, no, I shouldn't say that. The investigation's pretty much over. The investigation of their writings and their life and stuff like that, the interviews. But then you're really just waiting for more evidence. You want something supernatural to kind of confirm the hunch, one might say, that the church has that this is was a saintly person. You're waiting for a miracle. You're waiting for something supernatural to happen that's not explicable by natural means. Usually a healing or something like that. I think it's always a healing. It's never like, I don't know, water turning into blood or something. I don't know. It usually seems to be like a healing, like someone has a cancerous tumor and it disappears, or they're blind and then they can see, and you bring in the doctors and the doctors are like, we don't know. Which doesn't mean anything because, yeah, you cannot know how the body heals itself, but it could be a purely natural process. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a miracle. You need something that's like, it's like, well, that's a puzzle. That can't be explained at all. That's pretty good indication you've got something weird going on. And probably and if it happened directly, like you specifically asked, like, oh, Saint Bob, you pray to Saint Bob. Saint Bob, please give me back my sight so I can see, or maybe give me my sight so I can see, and whammo, it happens. It's exactly what you asked for. Now, it could have been a coincidence, just naturally all of a sudden your body figured out how to heal your blind eyes, but probably not in that case. If that happens, you get a miracle, then they can be declared blessed, be beatified, declared blessed. But of course, Mr. Melendez, the Lord could just be pulling our legs, right? God, at least the God I know, God of Israel, is a jokester, is a trickster. Rolls his own, Mr. Klitsch. So maybe he's messing with us, He sent us a miracle. He cured that cancer through the prayers of St. Bob, but maybe, I don't know. So let's wait for another miracle. We're going to wait for a second miracle. And if that second miracle also occurs, then okay, yes, we're pretty sure God is telling us, giving us the thumbs up to call him or her a saint, a holy person. Officially, now can publicly, universally venerated. Put our stamp of approval. She deserves to be in the Catholic Church Hall of Fame. So he's a saint, but I'll talk about other people who are still servants of God and venerables and stuff like that. And then like Native American Heritage Month, which is in November, yes. Talk about St. Catherine Tekakwitha. She was blessed for like most of my life. She's clearly a saint. I don't know what took the church so long to recognize her as a saint, but she was a blessed for like a couple of centuries, I think. Or maybe at least a century, I think. Get moving, church. All righty then. What's going on? Nothing. I get it. I won't take that to heart. But it's keeping me humble, right, Ms. Park? Keeping me humble. What is religion? Okay, well, I stopped off by we talked about planets. What is a planet? So, I mean, if smart people, very smart people, can go along for a very long time assuming what they know what a planet is until 2006 when they really scratched their heads and had to define one, okay, so I'm not going to be too worried if religion might be something that, people really didn't think of until maybe the modern period. People just assumed they knew what religion was. Ooh, whoops. Yeah, there we go. that was this for my discussion of planet, because this is a picture of the Earth and the Moon. I think that's an actual picture. It's not an artist's representation. Looking out from the Earth side, looking all the way up to the Moon. Thought that was kind of cool. And then we got football. I'm not going to talk. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to talk about football. We already talked about that. I'll move on from that. But, anyways, moving towards a definition, okay, of a definition of religion, right? Because I think that there is an assumption throughout human history that there exists certain realities beyond the natural material world, whether you believe in them or not. That's neither here nor there. It's just that when you look throughout the history of humankind, right? Okay, a lot of people believe that there's more to the world than the physical material worlds. More things are going on. There are spirits or gods or whatever. There's an afterlife or an underworld or whatever. Okay? There are realities beyond the material world. There is the material world, yes, but there are other things. Supernatural, above the natural. Superhuman beings. We can call them gods or spirits, but really, kind of that's kind of how we imagine the gods. They're like us, but they're really, really strong and powerful. I mentioned Thor in this class. I think I mentioned Thor. Did I mention the movies about the whatchamacallit? The Marvel movies. Okay. I've never been a big comic book fan, but and I personally, I'm not a huge fan of superhero movies. I watch one or two, but it's like, it's like everyone's got godlike powers. Even the guy who's like Iron Man, what's his name? That he's a totally, all he did was build a suit, right? He built a suit for his body, but he's like battling it out with Captain America in one scene. They're angry about something. And it's like they're bashing each other, like nothing can hurt them. And then then when they bring in like Thor, and who's supposed to be a god, like, all right, what's his special sauce other than being called a god? He can never die, maybe, I don't know. But then again, the Scandinavian Norse gods, at least they do die according to their mythology. Some of them died. He's really powerful, and the Iron Man guy's pretty powerful too. What's the difference? And that's how we kind of imagine the gods. The ancient peoples saw them as they're like us, but they're really, really powerful, really, really strong. There are invisible realms of existence, things that I can't see or can't experience. Maybe not now, but like an afterlife. Okay, once I'm dead, I'll experience that, I believe. Or maybe there's a before life. You lived before, right? Which is kind of an afterlife by another name. You were alive once and then you died and then you came back as somebody else. Or maybe still yourself, but, still yourself spiritually, but in another body, another form of bodies. Superhuman activities, okay? So even when humans don't talk much about it, we're just living in the moment, we're just existing, which humans can do for a long, long time. We can live on assumptions for a long, long time. Just look at history. Okay, people, assumed for a long, long time how the planets worked, how the planets worked, what planets were. People assumed for a long, long time that it was enough to just accept traditional explanations of how the world worked and what things were, and don't really have to test them for yourselves. You can use your own mind or experience them, see if they're true. That was like the real revolution of the Enlightenment, tradition was thrown out the window. It's like, okay, I know what 80 million Frenchmen tell me, or what I've been told over the past 2 or 3,000 years about, I don't know, where fire comes from or what fire is or something. But, maybe I'll set up a little laboratory and test it myself and see what is fire, what's going on, combustion. Where does it come from? What makes it happen? Well, God makes it happen, God. God wills the fire to combust, for there to be combustion and for it to burn as long as it burns. That's an explanation. Okay, a lot of people might accept that. But not me. As an enlightened individual, I want to know. So even if you don't talk about it much, it's still there until someone, points out the elephant in the living room, or says the emperor has no clothes, or, points out what everyone's thinking, but no one's questioned. It happens. It happens in history. That's what, and then you get in advance. And that's what happened with the Enlightenment. People started asking these kinds of questions rather than assuming. But so they knew there was something else. Maybe if they didn't have a word for it. Okay. Because, usually the evidence that for the modern conception or modern creation of religion is that, well, in ancient societies, they didn't have a specific word for religion. Okay, that's probably true for the most part, but it could also be true that people didn't think about it. They were busy living, trying to stay alive, okay, taking care of their families, and didn't have the luxury that we have in the modern world of leisure. Yeah, leisure is a modern commodity. It's not an ancient one, okay? Most people in many societies were hunters or gatherers, or they were farmers, many people. And anyone here from a farming family, I don't know if anyone, your dad or your mom are farmers or whatever, cattle raisers, the animals don't take no breaks. There are no vacations. The animals every day need to be fed and cleaned and, given antibiotics or taken care of if they're sick. And of course, you have to milk them and get the product from them that you're using them for. The wool, you have to shear the wool off of the sheep and get the milk from the cows. If that's what you're doing, you're selling that stuff. I won't talk about the other grislier things you might do to them. But, but anyways, I know you don't want to see how the sausage is literally made. But I do like a good sausage. I love pigs. They're cute as buttons. Cute animals, pretty animals. They taste so good. Anywho, yeah, there's no time. There's no time. You're constantly, if you're a hunter-gatherer, you're not settled. Farming communities are usually settled. But you're hunting all the time. You have to spend your whole day to go find what you're looking for. It takes a long time. So they don't have time to sit down and philosophize about what religion is. So I'm not surprised that, we don't find that a lot in the ancient world. But they knew it when they confronted it. Just like you knew when I showed you the video of that football game, the beginning of that football game, and then I asked you if it was religion or religious. When you're confronted with it, it's like, well, no, it's not religious. What is it? It's a sporting event. It's an athletic event. I know what it is. It's athletics. It's sports. Okay? I know that Mr. Saunders is wearing a football team, a sports shirt. He's not wearing a habit like St. Juniper Serra, like the Franciscans. How? They're both clothing. They have colors that mean things. They indicate something, whether it's support of a particular football team or membership of a religious group. When confronted with it, and when people are confronted with, when something weird or unusual happens, they know there's something weird and unusual. People are not stupid. They know that maybe they didn't have modern science, but, they weren't dumb. People, thousands of years ago. They wanted proof just like we want proof today, I think. They're skeptical, just because, someone comes out of the jungle and says, oh, the spirits appeared to me. That's not necessary, it's not like everyone says, oh yeah, of course they did, People might question and ask questions. What is that? They assume the supernatural. Like this guy, William Buckley. William Buckley was, is he an Englishman or what? I don't know if he might be from Scotland. But he was a prisoner who was sent to Australia by the English because the British were using Australia as a penal colony, a place to send prisoners and stuff like that, get them far away. So that's what they were doing with Australia. So this guy, William Buckley, was sent, I don't know what crime he committed or whatever, but a lot of time it was dead. You throw him into prison for dead, you pay debts. So, a lot of the prisoners were my people, Irish people, Scots, and we were poor, who just, couldn't pay back debts. So, okay, throw Paddy on the boat and ship this over to Australia. But anyways, so he was a prisoner, and he went to the prison there in Australia. I forget how he escaped. Something happened. He was able to escape, and he went into the bush of Australia. And of course, humans were living there already. There were the Aborigines. There were human beings. I forget how many tens of thousands of years. I think if I remember correctly, it's 30,000 years ago that the first humans discovered the continent of Australia and then started populating it. But they had been there first, before the English and the Dutch. Actually, the Dutch are the Europeans who discovered Australia. The Dutch ships saw Australia, kind of looked at it and said, this is just one big desert. We're not interested. They moved on. Whereas the English were like, hey, use it as a prison. So anyway, so he goes out into the bush and he's walking, and he bumps into, a tribe of Aborigines. Okay? This is unusual. This is first contact. These people had never met any Westerner before. They'd seen no one who was not like them. And if you know what the Aborigines are, it's very fascinating because they look like Africans. Like when I lived in Papua New Guinea for 9 months, they look like people from Africa. They look like sub-Saharan African people. They don't look Asian or anything like that. But you can see from the DNA, but you can see racially the lineage that they came out of Africa, walked along, because the oceans were lower then, so you could actually walk along the coast from the Middle East over India. Okay, you could even walk almost all the way to Australia, just on dry land, because the oceans were lower. Because there was an ice age, but most of the water was packed up on the poles. And that's what apparently these people from Africa went out there and settled Australia. But they don't look like the surrounding other peoples who are, Asian, from Southeast Asia and stuff like that. Fascinating. So the Aborigines, they're not European. And here comes this white creature, came home a man, because they didn't know what he was. He didn't look like them. This white-skinned creature comes out of the jungle well, not really jungle, but the trees, let's say the trees, and approaches him. They don't know what to make of him. He's weird and unusual. How do we interpret this? He's not normal. Well, of course he's normal if you were in England, If you were in England, back in England, and William Buckley stumbled out of the forest, no one would think twice. Well, you might think, what's he doing in the forest? Stumble out. But, there it is. He looks like me, another Englishman or European, so not unusual, nothing unusual about it. But they thought he was unusual. Therefore, he must be something else, supernatural. A ghost. A ghost. So that the tribesmen take him in. They don't kill him or anything. They don't harm him because they don't know what he is yet. And, they hold a little confab. I have a little meeting of the tribe to figure out what is this creature? And they finally decide that, well, since he's so white, he looks like he's dead. Because you get dead, blood drains and turn whitish, I guess. So he's probably a spirit. He's probably someone from the dead world of the dead. And they tried to think, well, who's died recently in the tribe? I think it was some little child or somebody. They figured out, okay, this person died recently, so it must be him coming back to us. And that's how they treated him the whole time he was with them. He was with them for a number of years. He in a sense, became part of their tribe. There's a whole store of documentaries about William Buckley. You can watch on any internet if you want. But they never wavered in their belief that, he was so unusual, he couldn't be natural. He had to be supernatural. He had to be a spirit from somewhere else. So when human beings encounter the weird and the unusual, we sense there's something more than the natural. Why do we do that? Why do we even do that? If it's not true. Doesn't mean that it's true, but it's just weird. I think, why do our brains work that way if it's not true? Because I can't think of anything that evolutionary scientists, this happens, our brains do this because when we were first evolving, it was a benefit to us living out in the bush. And, you see an animal and you don't know whether it's, vicious or not. So you either run away or you attack, or maybe you freeze, but you run away. It doesn't seem to fit into that paradigm because I can't think of any benefit of interpreting things being spirits or being gods. I mean, I can say that, I can be in a thunderstorm and be scared by the thunderstorm, the sound of the thunder, the feel of the air, being shaken by the sound waves of thunder and stuff like that. See the lightning and it scares me and spooks me and creeps me out. So I turn it into a god that I pray to because I don't want it to do that anymore. I guess that's the benefit, but other than that, it doesn't change a darn thing if I make it into a god. It's still going to have thunderstorms and lightning that are going to come and scare you. Anyways, we sense these things, and many cultures have recognized this fact, even if they didn't have a specific word for it. So, for example, start with the Greeks, ancient Greeks. Just, I'm starting there, not necessarily because the Greeks are any better than anybody else, but I'll start there. They called this experience theos, the divine. Theos, the divine. Related to the gods. Connected to the divinities, the godlike beings. Okay, something weird happened. Well, if it's something weird or unusual, it's probably not through human agency. So you'd attribute it to, it's probably a god doing something. So the thunder that I hear in the clouds is weird to me. I know I'm not making it thunder, okay? But I don't know why it's doing that. So I think, well, the gods are doing something up there. They're fighting. Or they're bowling. They're playing games. Which you think it may be a joke, Miss Cook, but no. The Irish gods used to play games, and so they thought maybe the sounds of thunder and stuff were, what's his name? Not Brian Boru. What's the god? Well, whatever. One of the Irish gods, the Celtic gods, playing hurling or something. So it's the divine. It has to do with the gods. They're up to something. It's not normal. And they had other words. They didn't call it religion, but threskeia, worship or devotion. The response to the divine, the response to what the gods might be doing, whether you want them to do it or you want to get them to stop doing it, if you don't like it, is threskeia, worshiping them, showing devotion to them, praying to them, asking them to do it, maybe offering them a sacrifice, an animal or a person. Usually a woman. You can tell they're male-dominated societies, right? Yeah, John. No, Mary, get over here. Get over here. think Poseidon is angry with us because he keeps flooding our village. So we're going to offer a sacrifice. Oh, okay. Well, where's the sacrifice? Mary, you're it. Make some offering. Show your worship or devotion to the God. Make the God like you so the God won't do things to you, bad things to you. Sothreskeia. If we jump over to India, the subcontinent of India, they talk about dharma. Dharma, they use this word dharma, which is a very broad term. It's not a specific term. It's very broad. It's related to the Latin word firmus.
I use that.
Yeah, okay. That's fine.
I swear.
Okay, go ahead. No one's stopping you. Last thing I need on my evaluations at the end of it, he refused to allow me to go to the bathroom. No, I'm not just, just think it's odd. It's Kelowna that, I have a better prostate than 20-year-old, but hey, everyone's different. Firmus is related to this word, firm. What makes the world firm establishes it. And that's kind of like the root meaning of dharma, that which gives the foundation of the cosmos. It establishes how the cosmos, the universe, will work, the law of the universe. That's what they even call their religion. Hindus they don't call it religion or Hinduism. They call it the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal Dharma, the eternal foundation, you might say. Which means that Hindus think they know the truth and no one else does. You want to know the truth? Study Hinduism. But it can also have other meanings: morality, ethics, virtuous life, okay, your duties in life. So you have various dharmas that you have to perform throughout your life. You have the dharma of being a son or daughter. So you have a dharma that you have to perform and fulfill for your parents. As students, you have a dharma to be the teacher. If you're a warrior, you have a dharma. And so on and so on. A role, you could say, that you have to perform, and you have to do it. You can't take on someone else's dharma. You can't say, well, yeah, I'm a warrior, a military man, but, I've always been a chef at heart, I didn't want to break things except eggs, I'd rather break eggs into a bowl and make, a petit four or something, or, an omelet rather than breaking buildings and people's bodies. No! Your dharma is to be a warrior. And even if you were the best chef on the planet, that would be wrong. You have to be the best warrior, perform your dharma to the best of your ability. You don't take on another person's dharma. That's your dharma. You don't change. So you're following the duties of your standing or position in the community. There's no sense of, well, I don't want to be a priest, Dad. Sorry, priesthood is, your father's a priest, your grandfather's a priest. That's our dharma. That's the caste we belong to. So you have to fulfill your priestly duties. And you have duties not just to your parents or to me as your teacher, but you have duties to the gods, to the spirits, to the demons, the bad gods. They're evil gods. I mean, Hinduism isn't like Judaism or Christianity or Islam, where it's like, God is necessarily good. A God doesn't have to be good. Who says a God has to be good? Completely good. Why can't a God also be somewhat evil? What by definition makes a God good? So, and a lot of ancient religions, and Hinduism is one of the most ancient religions on the planet, Yeah, they had this conception. The gods could do good things, but the gods could do bad things. So you wanted to make them like you, offer them sacrifices, devotion, threskeia, Ms. Jasmine, make them like you. So they wouldn't do bad things to you if you pissed them off. So there are bad gods, demons, we might say, devils, that you also have to worship and, kind of kowtow to and make sure, because you don't want them to rampage all over you, And hopefully the good gods will protect you. But that does, if you read Hindu mythology enough, you find out that they can't sometimes. Sometimes the bad gods actually, like they win a bet over the good gods. And they invade the good god's kingdom and take away their little palaces in the mountains and, start destroying the earth. And they have to come up with some way to defeat them. Usually interesting. This is what I like about Hinduism. It's a woman. They had to create a female a goddess to defeat the demons. The female goddesses in Hinduism could do things sometimes that all the male gods couldn't do. So Dharma, this thing, it's not the same thing as religion. It is applied to religious practice as well, because, the foundation, especially through worship, okay, the right performance of the rituals. You have to exactly perform the sacrificial rituals for each god or goddess. And by doing that, you're kind of reestablishing the Dharma, the foundation even of the universe. The reason that the universe is like it is, perhaps messed up, we might say, is because the rituals aren't being performed at all or not being performed properly. And apparently the situation is not going to get any better. Eventually, everything will be destroyed because of that. But it's okay. In Hinduism, it all comes back anyways. It's because it's cyclical. You only have a problem is being if you're a Christian, a Muslim, or an Orthodox Jew, where you think the world ends. You go to heaven or hell or something. No, you're Hindu, you always got the billionth chance of coming back. Over and over again. Oops, sorry. Other parts of Asia, like East Asia, China, we have the Tao. The Tao, they talk about East Asian cultures. China, Japan, Korea, talk about this idea of the Tao or the Tao. Again, it's a word like Dharma. It's very expansive. But how are you going to take the quiz without taking any notes? Not taking any notes at all? Nothing? How are they going to take the quizzes? How are you going to take the quiz, Mr. Klitsch? You don't know? Mr. Dobson. Calgon, take me away. How's it going, Mr. Dobson? Pretty good? Let me see. I was checking. Is that an Eagles hat? Oh, okay, yeah. Because they're playing tonight, so. Anyways, the Tao, the road, the path, the way. In a more conceptual, extended meaning, a principle, a guide, the Tao, a way of doing something. Okay, yeah, sometimes you'll see it spelled with a T, but it's pronounced as Tao. I'll say Tao or Tao, I don't care. I'm not going to go crazy over it, how you want to pronounce it. But anyway, just know what it is. And, this word entered, this idea of the Tao or the Tao it's kind of like Dharma in the same sense. It's the way the way the universe is and the way it works. If you can define it, it's not the Tao. It's by definition undefinable. Okay, which, to me that's like when you ask a priest a hard question, he says, well, it's a mystery. It's like, some Taoist priest just didn't want to answer the question. If you can define the Tao, then it's not the Tao, my child. Yeah, that means you don't know, right, Parson? Yeah. Too hard for you? Come on. Because the Taoist religion, well, some people wonder if it's a more of a religion or a philosophy, but in Taoism, they got tons of books written about the Tao, but telling you that the Tao can't be defined, right, Mr. Saunders? So a whole library telling you you can't define the Tao, the Tao. The way. How are humans to behave to the gods, to the spirits, to each other? So it includes ethics. It's the way the universe is meant to work. Yin and yang, a lot of dualism in Taoism. But woo! You know, duos, two. There's a lot of two, light and dark, male, female, good, bad. All right? Yin and yang, which means the male and female principle. Yin, I believe, is female. Yang or yang means the male. It also can be light and dark. Good and evil. It's two sides of the same coin. You might put it religious. A religious version of saying two sides of the same coin. But anyways. So good and evil. There is no good and evil. I mean, there is good and there is evil, but there's also no true just good and there's no just evil. They come together. They come together. Is it good to have a child? If you want a child, I guess, Is it good to have a child? Well, I guess I could ask your parents and get a few answers. Mom and dad on the spot, right? Is it good to have a child? Okay, maybe most parents, I think, would say yes. It's been a benefit to me. Perhaps. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't have any children, so. But, having a child, mothers, you go to the hospital and the woman has a baby and she seems to be pretty happy. She doesn't, like, oh, that came out? I mean, if she doesn't, then there's a problem. You got to think about, okay, well, what are we going to do? But, a lot of mothers seem to be smiling and happy, pleasured. And yet, the whole process, so that's a good, but there's also an evil to the process. The woman has to suffer pain. And parts of her body are destroyed, because it's blood. So you're tearing all the blood vessels, and the afterbirth has to kind of not rip out, but come out of her system after the baby. The baby comes out, and that's all that happens. And then the whole stuff that the baby was in the uterus also comes out with it shortly thereafter. So you have a lot of blood and messiness and stuff like that. Pregnancy sends a woman's body all out of whack, the hormones and stuff like that. Of course, you have another little creature that has to be taken care of, be fed and monitored. So there are evils as well. There are things that, are not good. I mean, the woman's back, she's not going to have a good back for a few months. That's not going to, and her feet are going to kill her all the time. So it's great, but, there's pain and it could be death. There is morbidity. It's not, it's not like every birth is successful. There can be problems that can kill the mother and kill the child. But that's just the way it is, right? That's how it's designed. That's pregnancy. That's just what pregnancy is. There's nothing good or bad about it. It's both good and bad from a Taoist perspective. It incorporates both. There's both pleasure and pain in life. And balancing those as they're balanced when they're out of balance in the universe, then things are not good. You need to have them balanced. That's what the Taoists are looking for when they say, live according to nature. What's the way of nature? doesn't mean all peacefulness and joy, because sometimes nature is destructive. So the Japanese religion, for example, uses this word. This word Tao comes into other languages. Korean, Taekwondo. If anyone took Taekwondo or Taekwondo, Do comes from Tao. Okay, it's the way of doing something. If you do the native religion of Japan is called Shinto, the way of the spirits. The Shin, another word for spirit, or Shen actually, from Chinese. The Tao of the spirits, the way of the spirits of Japan. It's just the way things are. And then we come to our buddies, the Romans. The Italians, we could say. And this is where we get our word religion from. They spoke of religio. They use this word religio. And they used this word religio before modern scholars. So it wasn't an invention of modern academy. The word was already out there. And it was used to talk about what you and I would just commonly call religion, the supernatural. So they recognized that there was something that they could put a word on, even if it wasn't always easy to define. And we can see this in the word itself, because it's not clear exactly what the word means in its etymology, religio. Where does it come from? Many scholars will say it comes from re and ligo. Ligo meaning to bind something, like to tie together. A ligature, a ligament, right? Which is the stuff that ties, tendons tie. The ligament binds our bones together, yes? The ligaments have to do with attaching the muscles. Can never remember. I could never tell one from the other, but anyways. But a ligament, because it ties, it binds together. So religion could be something that binds us together again, binds people together, okay, into a common group of belief, one might say. All right? You'll oftentimes find that as a definition. And you do kind of see this if you look at the culture of what's considered religio. You're bound first by your family. Your family is the basic religion. Each family had its own religion, its own religio. There were the spirits of the house. They're called lares and penates. These were the spirits. I forget which is which, but one, you had spirits that inhabited the hearth where you cooked your food, and you had spirits which inhabited the lintel or the doorway. People come in and out. So I don't know if I'm an anthropologist or just a religious studies person, looking at it, if I had to extrapolate or guess. Maybe it's, to be protective, protecting the door from bad people coming in, and protecting your food, because it can make you sick if it's not proper, or if you don't have any, you can starve. So maybe it's meant they created these ideas of spirits protecting the door, protecting the hearth to be for that reason. I don't know. It's a hypothesis. Nevertheless, so your very most basic religion for a Roman family was the home. You had the spirits of the house that you had to worship, and the spirits of your ancestors, your own family, that you worship. But then, you go out to the wider community. You had the special gods and goddesses of your town or your city that you belonged to that also had to be honored and worshipped. And of course, the gods and goddesses of the nation, the Roman nation, the people. So there are a whole bunch of gods, and the religion extended, did bind the community. It bound you not just to your own family, but to the larger community itself. And to not worship those gods, you were harming the community. That's why, Christians were persecuted. They wouldn't worship the gods of Rome. So if you wouldn't worship or acknowledge them, then you're offending them. and you're harming the community in some way. So if there's any disease or disaster, an earthquake or volcanic eruption or something, well, you're looking for reasons. Why would the gods do that to us? Would do something harmful to us? Who has offended them? Maybe that group of people in the community who says they don't exist, insults and blasphemes them. The Jews were hated for the same reason. Because the Jews believed in their the only God. There was only one God. He was theirs. And the other gods were nothing. They didn't exist. And so the Jews usually were, the Jews were respected because their religion was ancient. But no one liked them because they wouldn't get with the program and worship all the gods. I mean, no one cared which God you worship. If you were a Jew and you wanted to worship Yahweh, worship Yahweh. If you're a Christian, you want to worship this Jesus guy, worship him. That's fine. That's part of your religio. But you bring it into the rest of the community. You also worship the emperor. You also worship the God of your city, and you worship the gods of your home, your ancestors as well. That's fine. But to say exclusively, you're going to worship only this God and the other gods are even nothing? No, that was not going to fly. So these human ideas, threskeia, dharma, Tao, religio, okay? Whatever the terminology, and I could have also looked, I got to add a little thing about Native American stuff as well. I don't know very much about it. I actually don't know as much as I should, I guess. But I'll have to add that to a course in the future. But anyways, these all point to something. Whatever terminology is being used, they're describing some experience of human beings. Even if you don't believe in that experience, if you say, well, come on, there is no God or there is no Zeus or no Athena or whatever. Okay, fine. But they're describing something. It's not just the creation of the modern academy. And this something also has a family resemblance. There are a network of similarities that overlap, that allow people to just know that this is religion and not something else. And so it doesn't matter what culture it is, and religions are all very different, and the cultures are different, but people seem to talk, act, and think about these realities that we can call religious in strikingly similar ways. We find the same, what they call archetypes. Carl Jung, the psychologist, came up with the term archetype, and the religious studies scholars kind of purloined it. Stolen. They give him credit, I think, but archetypes, these perfect, well, not perfect, maybe symbolic ways of thought or acting that seem to transcend, that are just, well, for Jung, they were just innate into the human mind. And that's how he was trying to explain that, for example, in his case as a psychiatrist, mental illness, you find the same kinds of mental illness no matter whether you're in Japan or Argentina or Canada. Schizophrenia is schizophrenia. Because you see kind of the same symptoms. Same thing with religion, if I can put it in that kind of language. Not that religion is necessarily a disease. Some people think it is. But you find the same symptoms, sacred writings, mantras, authority figures, worship services, which include like sacrifice and offerings, spiritual beings, the belief in spiritual beings. All these things kind of come together in India, in Mexico, in Australia, amongst all these different groups in various ways. I mean, some of them, like in India, the Indians are religious geniuses. I mean, they were onto stuff, spiritual ideas, long time before other groups. That doesn't mean they figured everything out, because they could never kind of integrate the idea of one God with many gods. The Jews kind of figured that out, but that's just because God thumped Abraham on the head and said, "You're only going to worship me because I'm the only God." Okay. Now get going, shepherd. And some religions don't go beyond, they don't, not that they're not sophisticated, but they might stay at the level of more, there are spirits and things. they see a bush move and they think that it's an agency because it's moving, so there must be a spirit there. And it doesn't go much beyond that. Ghosts and spirits and stuff like that. That doesn't mean that the people are stupid or their religion is not sophisticated. It's like, it hasn't developed maybe that much. Whereas some, like I said, in India, you've got a real, over many, many centuries and maybe millennia, people thinking constantly about religion. That's another thing to remember about religion, is that it was not separate from people's lives. It is in the modern world. Okay, we talk about the secular and the religious. Okay, if you went to public school, that's secular, right? No, you're not taking any classes on religion. Though I don't know why. It's a human thing. You get to take a world religions class or something. Not like you're trying to convert anybody. It's just a human reality. People practice religions. Anyways, but anywho, generally that probably wouldn't fly with a school board or with the parents who say, yeah, we're going to teach a class on this or that or the other dealing with religion. But the ancients didn't think that way. They didn't think about it really at all. It simply was what it was. It was the Tao. It was the way the world was. There were gods and spirits. There were humans. There were ghosts. There were underworld figures. We just assumed that these things all existed, and they all had to be treated properly and according to their position in the what you might call the levels of existence. Right? Like gods are up here; they're of a high existence. Humans might be here, then animals, okay, then ghosts and demons might be something else. Right, Ms. Cook? Yes. But they bear a family resemblance, which we in modern times call religion. Religion exists. You look at this. This is some dude years ago when I first started teaching. I started teaching world religions, and I got this off the internet. This is some professor from some school here in America. Went to India, and he's doing puja, or a fire offering to I don't know if you can tell. It's the elephant god Ganesh. Ganesh. You should know. If you were in India, you would know as students, because Ganesh is one of the gods, like the patron god of education and stuff like that. So if you're a student, you want to pray to Ganesh. Or if you're too good on your exams in school, what? Can Ganesh deal with this? Oh, my people. Ganesh is cool. He's a baby. He's represented as a baby with an elephant head. You know why? His father cut his head off. His father, Shiva. I always say Shiva, the sheep and stuff. I want to say sheep. Yeah. Came home and kid got up and he with him, and so Shiva cut off his head. And Parvati, Shiva's wife, comes out, she's pissed off. Like, you cut the kid's head off. I think pissed me off. So, of course, happy wife, happy life, even with the gods. So Shiva has to make Parvati happy again. So he's like, all right, I'll give him a new head. So he goes and gets an elephant's head, sticks it on the kid's back to life with an elephant's head. Miss Haran, why didn't Shiva just go and get the head that he cut off, put it back on? I don't know either. But they said God rolls his own. Gods are smoking something different that we're smoking. Well, I'm not smoking, but anyways, hopefully you're not smoking. Well, I don't judge. I'm not here to judge. Anyways, but yeah, so he's got a little baby God with his elephant head. They're offering him fire. And yeah, you don't wear a shirt. You're half naked. As a priest, you take off. I'm glad I'm Catholic and not. I really, some of our priests, the average age of our priests is like in the 60s. I don't want to. No, that sounds ageist. Sorry about that. Edit that out, Dr. Dunn. Okay, so I know that is religion. I know that is religion, right? there's the Pope ordaining a guy to the priesthood, laying his hands at, and I see what he's wearing. He's wearing a helmet. He's wearing a helmet. No shoulder pads though, Mr. Saunders. But yeah, he's wearing this long gownish thing. This doesn't look secular to me. This is a thing from Japan where you take grass and you bind it up into this hoop, and then you, this is part of Shinto religion, Japanese religion, and then you walk through it in the form of a figure 8. I think it's in the spring. I have it here in my notes. What did I write down here? Hold on a second. I know I have it in my notes. Maybe I don't have it in my notes. Well, I knew I had it in my notes, but I'm not seeing it. No. I'll find it somewhere else, and I'll be like, well, whatever. Because I had the Japanese name. I wanted to impress you. I looked up the Japanese name. I think it's held in the spring. But anyways, you know, it's kind of a purification ceremony. You know, you're walking through the grass hoop, and it purifies you for the rest of the year, for the other half of the year, and stuff like that. So you do this. So you see, you know, this is a Shinto priests and people, you know. But but this is something. If I ask you what you guess this is, some kind of religious ceremony. You know it. You feel it. You intuit it. Huh. Maybe it's a different PowerPoint. Huh. Could be. Sometimes maybe I put an older PowerPoint on because I thought I had something else. Yeah, I must have. I'll have to check. Well, it's still all good. Same information. Just, you know, me blathering on about something else. Okay. Good to see you all. God bless you. I will see you now. Now the computers come up now. Let me check all of it. See you next week, sir. Wait a second.
Thank you. Have a good week.
You too, miss. Thank you. Have a good day. Have a good day, miss. Thank you. Have a good day, sir. I can't. This is insane. It can't be. I saw it. Have a good day, miss. Have a good day, sir. That doesn't make no sense to me. Thank you, Mr. Ruddle. Have a good day. Have a good day, sir. Come on. This can't be right. I saw it. I saw it. But it's not here, so I didn't did I not print out the right notes? Oh, you're killing me here. All right.